another one done. So this month we read 10 Ways to Destroy the Imagination of Your Child by Dr. Anthony Esolen. I was so excited to share this book with you because I've already read it before. Despite the title of it sounding like some parenting book, it is not a parenting book. It is more of a commentary on how we have failed to properly educate ourselves, how we failed to foster human beings, how we've educated children into just being machines. I've mentioned his name several times on my channel. I really like Dr. Anthony Esolen. He is a professor at Magdalen College. I believe he teaches literature, and he's just a wonderful human being, and he always just has this energy about him. He makes you want to learn anything. And that's what this book makes you want to do, is to drop all of your electronic devices and just live outside, read books, sing songs, and just be a real human being. That's what this book makes me want to do. The way he writes is very nostalgic, and it took me back to a lot of different events in my life regarding education, different teachers, and it makes me think about all the things that I was not taught, or I was not taught to value. He writes it in the style of Screw Tape. If you've ever read the Screw Tape Letters by C.S. Lewis, that's the kind of voice he uses to write it. And so it is satirical, and instead of wanting to destroy the imagination of your child, it makes you want to do the opposite. Hello, and welcome to the month of October. If you would like to join me in reading this month's book, in October this month, we're reading Kristin Lavransdatter by Sigrid Undset. We're reading just the first one, but if you want, you can read all three. I'm going to try to read all three this month. It is a trilogy, but because we read Brothers Karamazov, I thought, let's just keep it to one. So we're reading Kristin Lavransdatter by Sigrid Undset. It's a story about a woman named Kristin Lavransdatter, who is the daughter of Lavrans. It's set in medieval Norway, and it's about her life. This one, the wreath, is the beginning of her life, and up until she gets married. And then it keeps going in the second and third one. So I would love for you to join us. If you'd like to join us, please go down in the description below and sign up. Also, there is a Telegram group where we get together once a month to talk about the book, and we also share our insights, different passages that we like. So if you'd like to join, I'd love to have you there. And for now, let's get back to the book review. He has 10 methods, like he said, 10 methods to destroy the imagination of your child, and he goes through each method in the Screw Tape-like voice throughout the whole book. In it, he not only references literature, but he also references history, geography, science, math, everything. And he gives you just enough information about each thing to make you interested, to make you curious, and so you end up looking up different things. It is a very nostalgic book. He does romanticize the past a lot, but I think it's not because it was the complete ideal, but because I assume he wants you to long for an upbringing like they used to have. The references to literature are one of my favorites, just because I remember the first time reading it, there were a lot of literary references I had no clue. I had never read or didn't know. A lot of it, from reading just the titles of the different chapters, you might think it's just obvious, but he does go a little deeper than just, I would say, complain. There are a lot of books that just complain about things that we already know are problems, and they don't offer solutions, and he doesn't do that. For example, something that sounds obvious, one of his chapters is called keep your children indoors as much as possible, or they used to call it air. In that chapter, he says, now Dante and his medieval contemporaries did not assume that heaven was up in the stratosphere, or even on some star or other. It is a place beyond place, and more real than any created place, whose location, as his heavenly guide Beatrice will say in Paradiso, is in the mind of God. But the vastness of the sky will naturally lead the mind to contemplate infinities. It is wholly apt to associate the sky with expansiveness of the spirit, with joy and freedom and holiness. In the same way, the mind is apt to associate that lid of the earth with fixity, frustration, and the small cramped knot of evil that the damned soul becomes. The sky suggests the vastness of creation and the smallness of man's ambition. It startles us out of our dreams of vanity. It silences our pride. It stills the lust to get and spend. It is more dangerous for a human to fall into than for a human body to fall out of. So that's what I mean. It's not go take your kids outside and have fun and they'll be better. It's a little bit more, he gives you a little bit more, I guess where some people might think it's a little bit too idealistic is that part. Like that is in the beginning of the book where he says kids should go out as much as possible without adult supervision. It does, depending where you are, it can't always be done. Certain advances in technology that has made it easier for people to kidnap children, it's not as possible as it used to be. But he does express later on that children don't need much, to amuse themselves. Adults love to organize things for children, and it's not necessary. Children are so much more capable, and it's good for them to play amongst themselves, and that's how they learn to organize themselves. Like when kids would put together a baseball game or even a soccer game, you might not have everything. You might not have a net. You might have a little dinky ball on the side, and you might only have, I don't know, 2 trash cans to say, like, that's the goal. Like, I remember doing that kind of stuff when I was a kid, just inventing games, and then we would make the rules up as we went along. If someone cheated, we would eventually get it back together. But when there's an adult, because I know I do this, I've done this and I still do this, I need to do it less. I know that when my children are playing and if I'm there constantly, and I think it's also because when you hear them bickering, you just want it to stop. But you try to intervene in the most communist way. But I've learned as they're growing, because they're still small, will eventually solve whatever problem is going on. It'll be a little loud for a certain amount of time, just because children are loud, but eventually they get it together and they learn to do that together. They don't need an adult. And emphasizing how much they're bombarded with all these activities. Like, I had activities when I was younger, but not to a point where it's like every single day. Because I remember knowing people who would have swimming on Monday, I don't know, track on Tuesday, etc., etc., etc. They always had something after school, and they just never had time to just relax at home. And no one's ever home anymore, and that's so ironic. You have a home that you never go to. He does emphasize the importance of literature and how it's such a great tool for children and anybody to learn. And that's one thing I was very grateful for that he shared, was all this literature and its importance and how we as human beings learn to understand things. It's easier to read a story than it is to read a book about philosophy. So it's easier to read the Grimm brothers versus reading Aristotle. You know what I mean? It's yes, it's not the same, but starting with stories opens up a whole world for children and for adults too. One of the things that stood out to me is this part where he says, we want readers deeply illiterate because they have learned to read. In an age where pretty much everybody can read, it's so ironic that nobody reads. We know what's written on this piece of paper, but if we tried to read Shakespeare or Dante, we just don't get it. And we're so far removed from history. I think I'm just going to share this one of my favorite quotes in the book is about mothers. I cannot stress too much the wisdom of replacing the relationship of mother and child with that of worker and client. The mother is a world of mystery. She loves. She does all kinds of interesting things throughout the house. She sings, she reads, she loses her temper. She may be as peaceful as a summer evening or a whirlwind of fury, but she is always the mother. And her love for her child, even when it is shot through all the flaws of her character, will be a human love. It may be far from perfect, but it will be something real. He wrote so beautifully. I remember when I was younger and I was pursuing a career in acting, and I just remembered a lot of the people around me teaching us would kind of poo-poo older plays, or would just never show us that play. Those were the plays I wanted to read just because I had seen them in, I don't know, in a movie or someone had talked about it, but I never really encountered, for example, Shakespeare until I was 16, until there was this one man who was absolutely wonderful at teaching Shakespeare and made me want to learn more. But I remember everybody else was so about what is current, how can we get these teenagers to be interested in theater. And yeah, it was entertaining, but I don't remember a lot of it. The experience I remember the most are the ones where the ones I shared with this teacher who was just one of the best teachers I've ever had. And he was a dream. He was much older than everybody else, but he was so willing to teach us younger people about Shakespeare and just classics in general, classical plays, that it just made you want to keep learning. And that's this book. This book, it just makes you want to learn. It will remind you of all the times that the system failed you, that teachers failed you, that your parents failed you, but you can turn it around. There's still time to learn anything that you want. It is completely possible. Forming yourself to be a better human being, to be a real human being, not just a machine, and not just a person who can spit out information when needed, but actually a person who can take that information and process it and use it in their lives. Because that's one thing I think that is so lost in the world today. We're so obsessed with needing to know things, but we don't ask the question why, and what will that do? What good will that do? How will that actually transform my life? I love this book. This is the second time I read it. I will read it again. Anyways, I will leave you with that. I hope you enjoyed the book. If you haven't read it, do read it. If you have read it, let me know in the comments below what you thought about it. If you had a favorite method to destroy your children's imagination. And with that being said, let's get on to the next one.